Joining me for more on this is Dr. Matthew Sussex with the Australian Defence College and ANU Strategic and Defence Studies Centre. Thanks for your time. The initial story, of course, is pretty dire for Ukraine. Since then, there's been a lot of good news. Is this the toughest point since then? Does it start to feel like, can it hang on? Because we know it's easier for Russia to hang on.
Yeah, look, I think that's about right, Tom. It's at the point now where effectively Ukrainians, I think, are feeling a sort of grim determination. A few months ago, it was more enthusiastic. They thought they'd be able to push the Russians back considerably, and that hasn't happened. And to cap it all off, of course, the US is engaging in the throes of domestic politics and holding up further aid for Ukraine. So it is going to be, I think, a particularly grim winter for Ukraine. They have to make sure that they are able to keep their air defence network working. They're being subjected to regular cyber attacks. The Russians will try and press the advantage, at least in cyberspace and in the sort of optics of it all, even though they can't really make much progress on the battlefield.
So that's the issue, though. Right now, it might look as though Russia can't make big gains, but if morale drops in Ukraine, that could be a game changer. With that aid situation and what they have in terms of the air defences, at the same time as this not getting through, Joe Biden is announcing $200 million more of aid that will flow through. You know, how dire is it? How short are they getting of the sort of things they need to continue the war?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's a big difference between being able to hold the positions that you have and then potentially being able to advance and also being able to protect your critical infrastructure. Those are the big three things that Ukraine's relying on. Now, the big omnibus $110 billion US defence aid package that also includes Israel is this thing that they're frantically trying to hammer through. But US aid does run out at the end of the year, so there may well be some shortfall. So if you're on the Ukrainian side of things, you're worrying very much about whether you can keep the lights on. You're worrying also about whether you can halt Russian advances, because the Russians have shown that they'll use human waves. And worrying also about, the extent to which you can potentially gain a little bit more territory.
So I guess early on we were talking about whether Vladimir Putin would perhaps start to struggle to continue this war with so many deaths on that side. But for Russia, at least, from their point of view, this is not a war on their territory. Does that make it all the harder for Ukraine to think, do they need this sort of calculation right now to go, maybe we need to have an uncomfortable peace, give up some land we didn't want to give Putin a so-called exit strategy? Is it getting that dire?
Look, I don't think we're there yet. I think that the Russians calculate on the war going about 3 to 4 years, or at least that's about as long as they'll have human cannon fodder to keep it going. And if it does go that long, then yeah, I think you will see an uncomfortable peace for Ukraine. But also, frankly, at the moment, if the status quo is where they drew the line, then an uncomfortable peace for Russia too, because the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back about 50% of the territory that they initially took back in March last year. So, they have done extraordinarily well. For Putin himself, even though he's running again in the next elections, there's no guarantee he'll be there in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, no doubt they've done well. It's a question of, whether it will go as far as it looked like it might a year or so ago. And Matthew Sussex, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.